Mr. Kotak, the stock market certainly has been rather confused today. It was up, then went down, crashed 600 points down, recovered all the way up, in the green right now. They don't quite know what to make of the budget. What do you think is really, what's your take on it?
I think Vikram and Pranoy, first of all, maybe I would request and encourage you to look at the bond markets as well, because one of the challenges which have been a part of the Indian situation has been very high bond yields and interest rates. And therefore, this budget, if it maintains 3.5% fiscal deficit for 16-17, the outlay or the size of the government borrowing will be much more under control. And we can see a drop in bond yields as we talk. And that is a big positive, because that is the beginning of lower interest rates in the economy. And depending on achievability of 3.5%, I would like to believe that this gives room for the RBI to consider a potential drop in its repo rates, maybe as early as March.
Right, that's an important point. And I think that's a key point for boosting the economy, a kind of quantitative easing, which we've seen work so well in America. Do you think that is the single most important need for the Indian economy today, to boost private investment?
Pranoy, I think the key concern for most people in the financial markets was the fact that Indian foreign exchange, equity and bond markets were all under pressure since January. And you needed to get some handle on this. And therefore, a signal that we mean business, we continue to a commitment of 3.5% is a very important signal that India will be disciplined through these turbulent times.
Mr. Kotak, just wanted to ask you about the 25,000 crore rupees set aside. He said he'd give more for the recapitalization of PSU banks. But this has been one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest potential crisis areas for the economy. Do you think that money for recapitalization and the other steps that he's announced, did it go far enough, or should more be done?
Now, frankly, I would have felt if they'd done a little more, it was good. But if it was a trade-off between 3.5% versus more for recapitalization, the government has taken a call that 3.5% is important. However, if the bond yields drop, that will help indirect recapitalization of bank balance sheets, because banks own nearly 25% or between 25 and 30% of their deposits as government bonds. So that could be helpful to banks in terms of the revaluation of their bond assets through lower interest rates. Again, I think there is some room under Basel III for interpretation on what constitutes capital, and I'm sure between the central bank and the government, they would have thought that through as well.
Just a very simple question, because there's nobody I know who can answer this better than you. 3 months from now, where will the Nifty be, the rupee be, and the interest rates be?
Pranoy, I will answer that question if you can tell me 3 months from now where China will be, what Janet Yellen will do, and what will happen to Europe. Therefore, if I can get good answers to that, I would be very happy to answer that question. The question which we have to have a good answer to is that even if the global environment remains volatile, what are we doing structurally and fundamentally to make India in a much sounder place? And that is where I think I feel hopeful that we are getting a good synergy between structural government policy and monetary policy working better together for a more sustainable growth environment despite global headwinds.
I think in answer to your question, actually you raise a very important question, the external factor. And in fact, the budget speech almost starts with that. We are in very turbulent global economic times, which is almost an excuse, and you find that even in the economic survey, is like there is an insurance policy that things could happen. And the key that they show in the economic survey is that the correlation between India and the global economy used to be 0.1, hardly any correlation, and now it's 0.42. There's a strong correlation. So can India really, can we buffet us, can we insure ourselves or protect ourselves against a global downturn, which everybody seems to be forecasting?
No, I think the correlation is not as low. That is absolutely correct. And I think structural steps taken, and if the budget deficit is controlled to the level it is, and the mix of the expenditure is more towards capital rather than revenue, I think those are good signs for a structural improvement. And combine that with a reasonably conservative monetary policy, I think we have a good foundation to be able to withstand the shocks better. But Prannoy, we have $250 billion of global money, and if somebody in some part of the world decides to withdraw, the fund manager has to sell everywhere in the world, including India, and there is no way to protect ourselves in a more globalized India.
Right, Mr. Kotak, when Naina Lal Kidwai also joining us. But Mr. Kotak, before you go, one last very quick question. One of the other major thrusts of this budget, and something that industry and everyone else has been talking about, is just simplification, ease of doing business, ease of paying taxes, ease of dealing with tax demands. Do you like the steps that were taken today, and did they go far enough?
I think, first of all, this 45% disclosure scheme is much better than what we saw last year, which was a 60% scheme in a similar context. And at 45%, I would like to believe that many Indians should take advantage of this opportunity and come clean. Second point is retrospective taxation and ability to have a settlement. I think both these are extremely positive steps if we can get far enough on that, and it will sort of get out of the world's mind and India's mind that India is just been very unfair on the tax side, particularly on retrospective taxation. If we can get that behind us, that will be a significant addition on the scores for ease of doing business.
Right. Let me quickly get a reaction from Vivek on whether this really gives a comfort that there won't be retrospective taxation, because we've heard sounds and noises that there's going, but it keeps cropping up again and again. Was this enough done in this budget?
No, I believe not, Prannoy. I believe that most of the people who've been targeted for this, like Vodafone, it was a withholding tax they did for profits that were made by somebody else. That withholding you couldn't do on a retrospective basis, to my mind. So I believe that will be agitated, and what they should have done is withdraw that retrospective amendment.
They should have withdrawn it completely rather than saying one time and then you can get away with it. So has it really, Uday, solved that overhang of retrospective tax and India being unfair?
Prannoy, in some of this, it's finally going to be about conduct and action. Therefore, do we actually settle Vodafone in 2016-17? That will be the proof that it is behind us, and maybe a few other cases as well. So in that, I think proof of the pudding is eating it, and let's give the government a chance rather than prejudging it.
Right.